Hi, my name's John Scott. I'm a beekeeper in Jackson, Tennessee, and this video is just to document a little bit of an experiment that I'm working on. I'm an experienced beekeeper, been beekeeping for several years using traditional Langstroth hive equipment, and been doing a lot of reading lately about top bar hives and wanted to try that out. And this is my first attempt at top bar hive beekeeping. I'm not an expert at this at all. I've done a lot of reading. Like I said, I'm an experienced beekeeper, but I'm not experienced with this type of hive. But I'm going to show you a little bit about it and use this as some documentation of what I'm doing on my experiment with top bar hives, and hopefully it'll be a successful experiment, and we'll see how this goes. So this is my top bar hive. It's about 4 feet long. I used plans from Michael Bush's website as a starter, and that's a real easy plan to get started with. Built me one that's about 4 feet long. It's about 15 inches wide at the top, and the sides slope down on the bottom to something like a 4 or 5 inch width at the bottom. I've got a top on here that's basically just a piece of plywood with a couple of 2x4s under it. That lifts the cover up off of the top bars, allowing a little bit of space there that'll keep the top bar hive cooler in the summertime, which is a problem here in Jackson, Tennessee. There's a little bit of airspace there to let air move. It's all shaded nicely and, of course, protected from the weather. So that's what the top is like. I'm going to take that top off, and we'll look at the actual top bars that are underneath the top. Now I've got a couple of different top bars on this top bar hive. Going with Michael Bush's recommendations here, I have first in the part of the hive that's going to be the brood chamber, normally up towards the entrance, the bees should use that area as their brood chamber. I've got top bars that are about 1.25 inches in width, and then I transition in the back, further back, into some top bars that are 1.5 inches in width. And hopefully after these first 10, 12 top bars, they'll start to move out of making brood comb and making honey comb. And at that point, they'll need a little bit wider top bar. They build honeycombs a little bit wider than they do their brood combs. Now, I ran out of my 1.5 inch boards, and so I've got some fillers back here with some other brood bars, but by the time the bees get back to that part, I'll replace those with some 1.5 inch bars back there in the back. Now, I've also got some differences on these top bars. There's a little spacer up here up front. I'm going to remove that. There's also a difference on these top bars with what I've done underneath the top bar to encourage the bees to build straight comb. Left to their own devices, if you just give them a flat top bar, the bees very well may not make nice straight comb along that top bar, and it may not be centered in the middle of that top bar from what I read. And so from what I've gathered in my research, there's a lot of different ways that people try and encourage the bees to build nice straight comb. One of them is just to on the bottom of this top bar, dribble a line of wax down the middle of the top bar and hope that causes the bees to build a straight comb. I understand that's not terribly effective. Some people have had good success with it, but I've heard others talk about that not being really, really effective. I've gone up here in my brood combs with what I've read is pretty much the most effective method. And that is, I've taken a piece of cove molding, and I don't run it out the full width of the top bar so that there's still a place for the top bar to rest on the sides of the hive, but I've attached an upside down piece of cove molding so that it makes a nice triangle here on the bottom of the top bar. And that gives the bees a little more surface area to be able to attach the comb to and make a nice sturdy comb. And it also encourages the bees to build a nice straight comb as they build the honeycomb down from this top bar. I gotta say, one of the enticements for doing this top bar hive is the simplicity of it, and the fact that you don't have to build out 4-sided frames and fill them with foundation. I've spent countless hours doing that in my Langstroth equipment. But I also have to say that putting this cove molding on here for a guy that has no carpentry skills like me took almost as much time as it takes me to build out a frame. Gluing this piece of cove molding down, trying to get nails in it without splitting the wood. I split several pieces of this. I don't have any kind of fancy brad nailer or anything like that. I'm doing this by hand. So actually, these were kind of a pain. But I really want, if you have already a top bar with some comb on it, a nice straight piece of comb, that helps encourage the bees to do straight comb on the rest of the top bars. I don't have that to start with in this hive, so I need to give them the very best opportunity to build straight comb. And from what I understand, this cove molding is the best way to get them to build straight comb. But like I said, it was a little bit of a pain, so I've also done some other things back after I get out of the brood chamber. These first several frames are brood chamber. They all have that cove molding on it. But when I get back here to the top bars for the honey, I've done something just a little bit different. Another idea that I picked up off of the internet about how to do this from the guy that does the out of the blue sky videos on top bar hive beekeeping. You can find those on YouTube. Is just to take a piece of string. You want to use natural fiber and some beeswax, and melt the beeswax along the length of the string. Use that to affix the string to the bottom of the top bar. And that this, with it being raised and with it being beeswax, the bees like the smell, they feel at home, and it encourages them to build straight comb as well. So by the time they've built out, hopefully, nice straight comb on the brood chamber top bars, because of the cove molding I've got there, by the time they get back here to the honey, they'll already be building off of nice straight comb, and they'll have this as a guide going forward, and that's what I plan to do for the rest of this hive. And one of the things I've struggled with is how I'm going to feed bees in this top bar hive. With the sides of this hive being sloped, there's not a place for me to use my traditional, just to give you an idea what this looks like on the inside, it's not a place for me to use any of my traditional feeding equipment from my Langstroth hives. I can't stick a frame feeder in here, it's not going to fit. I can't use a top feeder, which is one of my favorites, because the bees don't move vertically in this hive. They're not going to move up and down, and a top feeder sits on top of a bottom box, and the bees come up and get syrup. Well, on a top bar hive, there's no vertical movement. There's no space between the frames for the bees to get up to a hive top feeder, and so that's not going to work. So what I've done is gone back to an old choice for feeding that I haven't used in years and years. This is an old hive front feeder or entrance feeder that I used to use in some of my Langstroth equipment when I was a real newbie beekeeper. On a Langstroth piece of equipment, you've got a slotted entrance on the front of the hive, and you stick this feeder inside that slot, and the front part of this feeder slips up underneath the entrance, and the bees can come in and out of this hole right here that you can see here to get to the feed. The feed's actually in an inverted bottle, like a mason jar, turned upside down into this hole that you see here. And so the bees go in this entrance and get underneath the jar and lick syrup out of holes that you've drilled in the top of the jar, which is turned upside down. It's not a great choice for feeding in the entrance, because it encourages other bees to come from other hives and try and rob out that feed out of the entrance. So I quit using those a long time ago, but I still got a couple of those in my closet. Well, that's a good thing, because what I've done, I already know that as the bees build out these first few top bars that are going to be used for the brood chamber, I know that as I transfer some bees into here, I'm going to kind of limit them to just those bars at first, instead of turning them loose in the whole 4-foot length of the top bar hive, and have them focused on building out this brood chamber here, or the part of the hive that's going to have brood in it. And so one of the things I'd already determined to do was to put a follower board in the back of those frames that'll kind of close off that front part of the hive and limit them to that front part of the hive. So what I did as I built out this follower board is cut it a little high. It doesn't go all the way to the bottom. There's just enough space underneath that follower board to allow me to slide my entrance feeder from my old hives up underneath there, allowing the bees from inside this front part to get up underneath that jar of syrup and get syrup out without actually coming back here in the back of the hive. So that's going to be my solution for feeding the bees as I introduce them into here. Let's talk about entrance for just a minute. I've read a lot about entrances. I know a lot of people do this differently. Some people put their entrances in the side towards the end. Some people put them in the side towards the middle. Some people put them down here in the end. It sounds like there's a justification for doing that any of those ways, that there's different people who advocate those different ways. I've chosen to go with an entrance in the end. And the entrance that I've put in here is actually a 2-inch diameter hole. Looking from the inside, you can see it's just a big old hole up there in the front. 2 inches is a size that the bees like, and the bees like bottom entrances. Now I know there's some other folks that argue to put the entrances in the top, to do smaller entrances that are easier to defend, doing multiple entrances in the front of the hive, and there again are reasons for all of those. What I've chosen to go with is an entrance that's pretty much like what they'd find in nature, a big 2-inch hole in the front of this hive. But for the moment, I've chosen to close off that hole just a little bit. I understand there's some problems with getting bees to transition into this kind of equipment, just like when I've hived swarms into my Langstroth equipment. You know, I've had bees abscond from a hive that I've put them in, and I'm afraid that they'll do this with this hive, and I don't want to lose the bees that I have to put into this hive. So what I've done, I have a little piece of plastic that's meant to be an entrance reducer on a nuke, and reduce their entrance down to be a queen excluder. These holes are big enough for worker bees to get in and out of, but are supposed to be small enough to keep the queen from getting out. So hopefully with this taped to the front of the hive for the first few days, it'll keep the queen confined inside of the hive, and thereby get the other bees to remain inside of the hive. And then after their building comb and the queen is laying in there and they seem to have accepted their new home, then I'll remove this off of the front and open that hole back up. I'm going to do a couple other things to help make sure they accept this new home. One is I'm going to be feeding them. That's both to keep them happy in here and also to encourage them to build comb quickly. I've also bought some lemongrass oil, which you use a lot of times in swarm boxes and stuff to encourage bees to come to a swarm box and to a swarm trap and to stay there. The smell of lemongrass oil mimics some of the pheromones that scout bees use, and it's something that's attractive to bees. So I'm going to soak a cotton ball in some lemongrass oil and throw that down in there. And I'm going to put just a little bit of old comb in this hive. What I'm doing is taking a Langstroth hive that I've got that's an old hive and has some really old comb in it, and came from another beekeeper. And I know that she used chemicals in her hives to treat mites, and I don't do that anymore. And I'm concerned about what kind of chemicals are in that wax, because wax will soak up those chemicals, and I'm concerned about the age of those frames, the wax in those frames in that hive. So what I've decided to do is just take them out of that hive and put them in this top bar hive. I may take maybe one frame and do a cutout on that frame and attach it to a top bar and put it in here, a frame of brood, as something to encourage the bees to stay in this hive and also to give them that brood hatching out. Or I may just take a small chunk of comb and throw it in here for the smell and that kind of stuff. But other than that, I'm just going to take the bees and shake them off of the frames of that other hive down into this top bar hive and see how they do. So that's my experiment. This video is kind of documenting the start of it, and hopefully I'll come back later with great tales of success. In the meantime, you can keep up with what I'm doing, not just with my top bar hive, but the rest of my hives as well by going to www.scottapiaries, that's SCOTTAPIARIES.com, scottapiaries.com, and I'll keep you up to date with what's going on with this top bar hive as well as the rest of my hives. Should be getting close to extracting some honey out of those here shortly, and thanks for watching my video. Have a good day.